Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners. So, let's be friends. And we're going to discuss many F1 things, the Max apology, but we won't lead with Red Bull tonight, but there is a chunk of Red Bull stuff. Is Horner in trouble? There seems to be a lot of rumours of shifting power at Red Bull. And what does that 11-point penalty points system thing for Max actually mean? Because people are talking about the race ban that he'll get if he picks up another penalty point in the next two races, but there's actually a much worse scenario potentially facing Verstappen and the stewards and F1 around this penalty points limit. We're going to have a look at Ferrari. Is Vasseur genuinely under pressure with the failed update? Even though his team is P2 in the constructors, could he be feeling the pressure? Is this the start of the much predicted, by me, Williams 2025 decline? Have Mercedes also given up on 2025? And we've got a bunch of other reckons as well. A few of you, for example, think that I'm too harsh on Norris. And I'll fight my corner, but I have to say some of the patrons did change my mind a little bit today here in the chat. And there's more, and possibly less if we don't get to the topic. So we took a little break after the Spanish Grand Prix. No midweek content this week, and I'm glad we did. That was exhausting. That was the most interaction we've ever had on Missed Apex Podcast, and the biggest show downloads we've had for a while. Acast now tells us that we regularly, in any given month, we regularly have over 100,000 listeners, not including YouTube. But in May, there was a record 111,000 of you listening to Missed Apex Podcast. Jason on Blue Sky asked me, does it feel different recording the podcast knowing that many more people are listening? Is it any different to when the audience was smaller? The answer is no. I was nervous and panicked when it was a few hundred downloads, and that is the same now that it's, tens and thousands or 100,000 listeners. The scale of the interaction is different. That's a lot. But that comes after the show and after the recordings. For the recordings, it's always just been sitting down and chatting with some like-minded folk like you. And of course, I can't see you, which helps, but I will see you for our July 5th Silverstone event. So email me spanners@missedapex.net if you want to come and see us live at Silverstone, and I will send you a link to sign up. We are having a £15 cover charge to help us cover the cost of the venue. And also, we find that if it's free, a lower percentage of people who say they're going to come. So there's kind of, two reasons to do that. Plus the space is limited. So I don't want people signing up if they're only sort of semi-flaky on going. So you can come to Formula Fast in Milton Keynes on July 5th, and there's a bit of karting available before the live show. You don't have to do that, but I think it's like 25 quid to try and set a time. See if you're faster than Spanners. Get in touch with me, spanners@missedapex.net. I'm joined in the shed by Matt Trumpets. Good job putting the news together for this show, Matt. There's actually a lot has gone on since the Grand Prix.
Yeah, and there will be even more going on because we have the new regulations coming in. We have all the nonsense from Barcelona. But really, most of my work this weekend was with my bet as to how many times I can mention MotoGP in a Formula One podcast.
And we're also joined in the shed by our MotoGP Matt Trumpets equivalent. It's Jules Sagers. Hello, Jules.
What's up, Spanners? I'm also nervous and panicked, but that's mostly because I'm the token Dutch guy of the pod, and I need to be on in the massive relapse of Max Verstappen last weekend.
I have been hearing a lot from your countrymen this week, actually, Jules.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Look, hey, people are passionate in motorsport, and, the Dutch fans, a lot of them are really angry, even talking about boycotting Formula One if Verstappen ends up getting a race ban.
Yeah. It obviously it won't go down like that. But it just shows how passionate they are about Max and about him being where they are used to him being. But this is the first real setback they experience being a Max fan, and that's, I think, whoever you are and whoever driver you support, that's always a hard pill to swallow.
Okay, look, I was going to say we won't lead with Verstappen, but we're talking about it now, aren't we, Matt? So we may as well.
Yeah, this puts me very much in mind of that year that Lewis Hamilton kept on hitting Massa. It was already a bad year for him, and he kept on getting these crashes. And I remember you start to feel, although with Lewis sometimes there's some very much substance to him being not treated the same as other drivers, but you begin to feel like they're really taking aim at your guy when it's already not going well for them. So that sense of victimhood is at least a little more earned, perhaps, in this instance.
Relapse is a good way to put it, Jules, because that was like a flash to bang moment for Verstappen. And I think if you're a fan of his, do you welcome those kind of moments and go, well, that's the passion, or do you kind of go, well, actually, that holds him back and lets him down a little?
I think most of the fans have always defended him and started to like him even more for his demeanor, his behavior, the way he is, straightforward. He doesn't bake any sweet cookies, as we say. So he tells it like it is, and he responds in a very primary way, and he says the things he wants to say, and he shuts down interviews whenever he doesn't want to talk about things, and that's what appeals to a lot of his fans very much. So I think it's not the given the fact that he did what he did, but I think, as Matt says, it feels to them like when it rains, it pours, and you can say whatever you want about that, because I think we could have a whole discussion about how much does it really rain for Max and Red Bull. I mean, if you look at Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, how many seasons he's been waiting for a car he can win in, or Lewis's years at Mercedes the past 3 years. So, and maybe we're gonna touch that, but what I found most, how do you say this? Not disturbing, but just hard to listen to is that the conversation wasn't like, should you be doing this? But the conversation was like, yeah, but let us explain why he was so frustrated. And that should not be the discussion, because that's not what it's about on the track and when you're competing against your colleagues. But that was where a lot of the discussions about this topic went, like, yeah, but you need to understand where he's coming from, because he was frustrated about this and this and that. And you can't sugarcoat this, in my opinion.
No, so it's interesting. You can't sugarcoat using your car as a retaliatory weapon. The fact that the stewards didn't, I read the stewards report, they didn't even look at it in the end as that. So it's not been assessed as well, he did this revenge punt, so what penalty can we do? It was, well, who was predominantly at fault for causing the contact? It was almost treated as if it was an overtaking incident, and we've heard nothing from the FIA to counter that since the race.
I will just throw in to my memory, because I haven't looked it up, but the specific language they assigned the blame to Verstappen in is the strongest language I can ever remember seeing in any of these documents. It wasn't like they said, well, predominantly Max was to blame. It seemed like to me, it was like, there is really no doubt at all that Max is at fault for this. And so I get why from, again, just from like legal reasons, for like, we don't want to deal with it reasons, or he's a multi-world champion, so they always get treated a little different reasons, for whatever reason, but it was still pretty darn strong for your average FIA document.
And his Instagram post, I believe it was on Instagram, he said, we had an exciting strategy and good race in Barcelona till the safety car came out. Our tyre choice to the end and some moves after the safety car restart fueled my frustration, leading to a move that was not right and shouldn't have happened. I always give everything out there for the team, and emotions can run high. You win some together, you lose some together. So it's legally, it's enough to go, this isn't technically an admission that he on purpose hit George Russell with his race car. So he's got to do the legalese. Otherwise, it just lives there and sits on the internet forever. But anyone claiming that this is anything other than I got frustrated and I punted Russell out of anger, you're being disingenuous. That is legitimately what is being said here. And I think he's going to be lucky if it ends up being just a 10-second penalty and those penalty points. I think there's some rule where you can't penalise them twice. So if you get that penalty out, you can't do it again. Double jeopardy. I know there's an American law on that, isn't there?
It's an American law. I think it's always, if there's new evidence, things can be looked at, but generally your time penalties are not, can't be appealed or anything like that.
Yeah. So I have to say, I did say if he apologised, fair play. So to that extent, fair play. I still would like to know how the authorities see it. I would like to know if somebody who also does that, knowing they've got a 10-second buffer to the car behind and enough penalty points for it not to be an issue, do you get a free hit? That's what I want to know. So there's a couple of connotations out of this, though, with this 11 points. So he's 1 point away, and if in the next 2 races he gets a single penalty point, that will be a 1-race ban. Now, the reason for that is whenever you get them, they last for a year. So the ones he got in Austria last year, he got 2 penalty points for the incident with Norris. So those get erased after the Austrian Grand Prix, and then he's you say home free, but he will still be on 9 penalty points. And there are enough things that warrant 3 penalty points. So I think the most interesting concept here isn't that he gets a race ban in the next 2 races. It's the fact that those 9 will still be sitting with him all the way to the Dutch Grand Prix. Now, what happens if in the race before the Dutch Grand Prix, he has an incident where you go, that is a nailed on 3 penalty points? And that is a thing that could easily happen with Verstappen. Verstappen is a driver who draws penalty points. Either way, it's going to be a shambles, because you'll go, why didn't he get penalty points for that? That was a clear violation. That was a nailed on penalty points, and probably cite other examples of where people have got them. Or they follow through and they give him penalty points and he misses the Dutch Grand Prix. That would be a disaster.
But do we really believe that the stewards and Ben Suleiman, are they gonna let it go this far? I have zero confidence in fair stewarding if it would come to that point, if it would go down the wire like that. And that's nothing to do with it being Max, or whether you're a pro or against him, whatever. I think the recent years have showed us a couple of things. One of them is the stewarding feels so random now and then.
Yeah, inconsistent for sure.
Inconsistent. And also, F1 has never been so much of an entertainment sport, TV spectacle as it is nowadays. And Liberty, they have done a lot of good things, but are they really going to sacrifice their number one hero, the big shot of the sports, especially in his home race? I don't believe it for 1 second.
But you can't be doing that, though. You can't change what the penalty is going to be because of how it's going to affect the Grand Prix.
Yeah, but look at how they solved this. Like you said, it wasn't even an official investigation. His penalty is 10 seconds. I mean, there people get 10 seconds for looking the wrong way sometimes.
Cutting the track the wrong way, yeah.
Yeah, so... No, I have again zero confidence that it's going to be like that. And if it does, it will be a real shame for the Dutch Grand Prix and all the fans. But I think they'll still come because they have only 2 left, 2 Dutch Grand Prix to go, and then they'll be off the calendar.
Yeah, but am I wrong? Am I sick for this? Is the scenario I am hoping for, though, because that is the funniest possible scenario. So get through Canada, get through the Austrian Grand Prix, 2 points come off, and so at some point between the British Grand Prix, Belgium Grand Prix, and the Hungarian Grand Prix, we need him to potentially be ticking over that just to watch the world burn, Matt. Sorry, no apologies. I want to see it.
No, I love that your responses are so entirely different. Jules is being very rational and Dutch. Like, there's no way that they would, and I would agree with him. Like even if, there's no way any steward would give him that many points right before but then in my mind, I think to myself, okay, but what would he have to do that they couldn't not give him the 3 points? And that's where the real fun comes in.
Are you saying that Max Verstappen has so much plot armor for the Dutch Grand Prix that at the Hungarian Grand Prix he could like drop rakes out of the back of his car?
What would he have to do to get 3 points in the race before, especially if he'd already cleared, if he's cleared those two, he'd have to get 3 points. Like, what kind of a horrible, the mind boggles to figure out how he would manage that. And it would have to be like, Perez at Singapore or something like that, just smashing into everybody.
But you don't have to do an awful lot, Matt. How are you versed on what you have to do to get these penalty points? So, over 3 races, he could easily pick up a 2-pointer and then another 2-pointer. And then you've got the steward at the Hungarian Grand Prix not really paying any attention and going, oh, that is probably a 2 penalty points for Max. And then, oh no, what have I done? And then he gets a phone call going, yeah, Liberty would like a little word with you, Derek. I know that doesn't work in this case because there is a steward called Derek. But, we're going to, should we do it on Zoom? No. This is an in-person meeting. You're gonna have to come in.
What is interesting, come to think of it, Austria is, of course, the track where last season he had this come together with Norris in turn 3. And turn 3 in itself has been the stage of a lot of controversial incidents in the years past.
Now, see, but this also opens up a fascinating opportunity for every other driver that's going to be around him, because he can't afford a penalty point.
Yes.
And so, you're talking about that Norris incident. He could afford to just smash Norris out of the race and say that was Norris's fault. That he could roll those dice because he had margin, even if it was his fault. So what? He gets a penalty point. Life goes on. Now, however, he has to be super clean, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how many drivers try to take full advantage of it in the upcoming races.
Yeah, it won't be Alonso, obviously, and it won't be Tsunoda.
Well, you got to get there in the first place.
It won't be Tsunoda, Lawson, or Hadjar, but there will be some drivers there who would be spoiling for it, I reckon. So who did we have here? We said EJ said, I reckon that George Russell will do everything he can to draw a fault by Verstappen. Paddy said, I reckon all the drivers in the top teams have been working out how to best wind up Max over the next 2 races to get him to do something stupid in the heat of the moment. And we had Maria in there, and I can't find the comment, but I know Maria said something along the lines of, oh, Russell wouldn't be bothered by that kind of thing because Maria is a Russell fan. But Maria, you are wrong. George Russell would absolutely love it. He would love it if he was able to draw a foul from Max Verstappen. I think there's genuine beef there. I think he's really vocal. He did that long speech last year about, and it's proven to be spot on. When he doesn't get what he wants, he lashes out, and he lashes out with violence. And we've seen many cases of that in Formula One, compared to the other drivers. This isn't NASCAR, but, shoving Ocon, grabbing the wing in the pit lane when he was frustrated, with letting off of the brakes when he's being overtaken. In fact, his most dangerous is when he's frustrated because he's got a slower car and someone's coming to overtake him. And, you can call it skill and race car if there is, but some of those were definitely flash to bang moments. And I was just struggling there because I wrote a list down. So there was an Autosport article that questioned whether or not Verstappen had been leniently treated by the stewards, and they called it the Verstappen problem that the FIA have made for themselves. And so I put on Twitter and I said, hey, there's this article on Autosport. Do you think there's incidents where he's been treated leniently or where he's been treated too harshly? Massive response from that. So thank you to everyone who responded. Unless you've got anything jumping out at you, I was just going to go through a list of what some of the people were saying. And of course, there's a counter from Verstappen fans to all of these. But, people are pointing out Monza 2021, really there was no penalty after the engine change because there was an engine change coming up. They took that penalty. The punishment was then a grid penalty with an upcoming engine penalty. And you go, okay, that does feel pretty lenient because the stewards are not aware that they're probably going to have to take an engine penalty coming up. So I think leaving your foot in, professional foul. The ending up on the top of the car is unlucky, but the spinning up of the wheels, that alone, to me, warranted a harsher penalty. But, even things like overtaking under the safety car in Abu Dhabi. We've got screenshots of all that. He was definitely ahead. You're not allowed to do that. That's a nailed-on penalty. Wasn't even discussed. Wasn't referred. I think that's the thing that Mercedes appealed. They appealed that one, and it was just dismissed. Crossing the Monaco pit lane exit line. Suddenly they changed the definition. Oh, but it wasn't all the way over. Trying to race Piastri under the safety car, not even investigated. And people are only talking about whether Piastri did anything wrong. And look, the brake check. Imola 2021, just hitting Hamilton off. Hungary 2024, he was locked up and out of control into turn one, fully locked up, hits Hamilton. No further action. The Steward's report said Hamilton could have done more to get out of the way, drove Norris off track at Kota. Then Norris is the one that got the penalty. The Miami 2025 impeding. All those clarifications about the overtaking in the pit lane. And Austria last year that Jules mentioned. Forget about turn 3. He was trying to run him off track on the way down to turn 4. Not even mentioned. Not even looked at. Brazil 2021, the just let them race. That obviously should have been a penalty. Didn't affect the race, but obviously that was a penalty. There's a long, long list of these. And so I've gone on a while. Brazil 2022. I think he didn't even say that was on purpose. There's a long enough list that I don't think it's insane to look at that and go, sometimes he gets lenient treatment.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. He's a world champion. He's a generational talent. And even if you look across other sports, I mean, Michael Jordan was renowned for getting an extra stop when he played in the NBA. It's not an unheard of phenomenon.
No. And look, and maybe Hamilton got a bit of treatment like that when he was the bigger star or on the rise. I actually felt like, for example, Canada, I think 2014 or 2015, where he just like booted Rosberg off at the chicane and nothing was done because it was seen, it's an aggressive move. Oh, that space is always disappearing. So there could be an element of that. But I don't want to be like a conspiracy theorist, but it's just a constant feeling that Verstappen does get away with these things. And when he does get a penalty, like in Monza, so often that penalty has no real effect. So I was going through these and I was looking at the Steward's reports and the amount of times he got a time penalty, but it didn't cost a place. And you kind of go, well, is it because of this big team thing, like Michael Jordan, like Matt is saying? Is it in fact, as well, part of the problem that the stewards know that they're going to get a lot of pushback from Christian Horner and from Jonathan Wheatley and from that team very vocally, and from backlash from Verstappen fans? I think that has an effect.
Good point, because Wheatley's no longer there. In fact, he said about the whole Christian Horner complaining that, the FIA should tell us that we have to get the place back. We shouldn't have to figure it out ourselves. He actually made the comment, no, the teams know what they're about. They can make these choices themselves. And I thought that was really interesting because they don't have their Wheatley anymore to argue the case.
One thing that I discovered in my reading today, and look, there people have definitely countered me on these things, and I kind of know what I'm doing is a type of a debating trick where I'm listing so many things that it's called a gish gallop. I'm listing so many things that to take the time to break down each individual one is so time consuming that I'm overwhelming you with these individual points, and you might feel those points are low quality. Always happy to have a debate. I've debated all of these at length. I'm telling you how I feel and how it feels to me. But today I found out that Jonathan Wheatley and Michael Massey were actually good friends. They would travel around together. Do you remember that we used to be able to hear the conversations between the teams and the FIA and with the race director? And I was reminded of that Saudi Arabia one where Verstappen had overtaken off track or something had happened and they were negotiating what his penalty should be on the restart. And so this is before any of Abu Dhabi. And so in context now, going, oh no, actually they were quite chummy. Did they just let their relationship of being friends? They probably assumed to themselves, no, we'll handle this, in a fair way. We're not going to let it affect stuff. We're always just going to talk it out in the same way Charlie Whiting used to talk it out. And then when you get to Abu Dhabi and you've got Wheatley, they go, look, mate, honestly, we just need one more racing lap. And it makes sense to Massey in that moment. And you had, Toto Wolff was also on the radio there to him going, no, it's Mikey, this is so not right, in quite a friendly and chummy way. And that was quite an interesting kind of hark back to that time, because I don't think they do that now, or we definitely don't get it broadcast now.
They've changed it so that doesn't happen any longer. And for that very specific reason, is I think looking backwards, they're like, this is probably a leftover relic of an older system that isn't appropriate for a modern day sport with this kind of stakes and this kind of money involved in it.
And let's not forget that the sport has a massive history of solving these things or these matters behind closed doors and in a bit of a shady way. Last week you had a lot of references to Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna. They weren't the neat school boys. They did things that just weren't right and belong in the category of what Verstappen did last weekend. But back then, you didn't have the social media backlash. You didn't have a lot of media there. So when Prost and Senna collided, the FIA president Balestra, he decided the world championship in a back room at Suzuka. For instance, or how Schumacher was penalized after hitting Villeneuve in '97. He got just the kind of penalty that you refer to, Spanners. Like, it doesn't really matter because he was just scrapped from the World Championship standings and the season was over anyway. So it didn't really hurt him. So it's of all eras, and I think that we have this kind of behavior in a certain way. It belongs to the sport, and in a certain way, I welcome. A bit of a feisty rivalry. I sometimes miss that drivers openly dislike each other or talk crap about each other. I don't need them to be all happy friends and playing sim racing or golf together. And I like that things are a bit scruffy, so to say.
Don't worry. I think the Russell and Verstappen thing is real. I think they don't like each other a lot. And the fact that it was Russell that hit him, then he got told to give that place back, I think it being Russell played a part. And so, that is his emotions getting to him. I'd be the same, by the way. If I was an F1 driver, I would be awful. I would have beef with someone. Yeah. It would definitely change how I drove.
And I think Norris wants to maintain the friendly relationship he has with Verstappen, but deep inside, I mean, he's been shoved by Verstappen so many times already. He's all the reasons to dislike him as much as Russell does, maybe even more. But the sport kind of needs this, in my opinion. But how do you regulate this and how do you penalize things? That's a different story. And I think we all know and we all agree that it seems like there's too many relationships from the past or drivers who are stewarding, who are maybe a bit too much fans of the sport and maybe even of certain drivers. So it's just so hard to how do you say it? Referee this in a correct way, I guess.
People immediately pointed to the penalties he got. So last year was it Circuit of the Americas, he shoved Norris off, but Norris got the penalty for overtaking him off track. And Max did a big lift once he was off track. So Norris would have had to have stopped to not overtake him after being shoved off. There was a subsequent race where Max got penalties, and wasn't that Mexico? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that you were speaking of former drivers. I think that was Johnny Herbert's last decision as a steward in Formula One. I think he gave up those penalties, and then all the links he had suddenly became an issue, and that was his last one. Matt, you've got a point, and I'll finish this because I do feel bad. I know it's been covered a lot, the Verstappen thing, and I wasn't going to go off on one about it, but then I did.
Well, that's okay. I wanted to bring up an interesting, we talk about Max missing the Dutch race.
Yeah.
But Red Bull only has a single driver left they can put into that seat if he does get suspended. So this is also something he's going to have to pay careful attention to. That's what I wanted to bring up. There's an extra reason for him to be super careful, because if he does get kicked out, they can only put one more person in that seat this season.
And who do you think it would be then?
I'd have to be Hajar. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, but then there's a thing. You go, well, do we give him Max's car or do we give him Yuki's car? Don't tell me they're the same car. Don't tell me the number one driver and the number two driver get the same car.
I think he gets Yuki's car and Yuki gets Max's car.
That'd be good.
But then they're done. It's got to be Lawson, Tsunoda, or Hajar from there to the end of the season. So it's there's a little more riding on it than you'd think.
Okay, last thing on this is, and I have been tweeting about this for, and it's at the F1 media, and there was a prominent F1 personality in the media who no longer works for F1, and was asked directly, why didn't you speak up about Abu Dhabi 2021, why weren't you more critical? And their answer was, I was keeping a roof over my head. Very honest answer, but that's the pressure you're on when your employment directly depends on an organization. And if nothing else, I just want people to not come at me and go, oh, but that organization said opposite. That organization said this, therefore that's an authority. You have to put it into context that the mainstream media guys, if they're reporting facts to you, that's great. As soon as they try and give you their opinions, they are severely, severely limited. So the TV broadcast I watched was nearly, a lot of the people were petrified to say he did it on purpose. Let's be clear, he did it on purpose. Then you got those articles saying, no, he would never do it on purpose. That's from a top journalist, a top online. And then I listened to a podcast, another F1 podcast, which I tend not to do, where they were saying, that the 10-second penalty was sufficient, and they were really, really downplaying it. And like this was all before the apology, so they weren't able. They were so choked up, they weren't able to say that very obvious thing that he hit someone with his race car on purpose and should have got DQ'd. So I just want that context. I'm not telling people they should risk putting the lack of putting food on their family's plates. It's just a truth that I wanted to put out there. America's coming to Formula One, Matt, and there are rumors circulating around of who is going to drive for your American race car team. Who do you want? Because I assume you will be a completely, from day one, Cadillac fan.
Well, yeah, you have to support the home team, even if they're not your favorite. They're your home team. And remember, so I've always been a Haas supporter.
Everyone can do that except British people. Don't you Brits be supporting British people.
7/10 of the grid is British. I mean, honestly, really.
Dutch is fine. Jules doesn't support Verstappen. He's just being difficult and edgy. And that's why I always put his home address in the show notes so that fellow Dutch fans can go and hunt him down. But yeah, Matt, you're going to be default into Cadillac. Who do you want?
Yeah, well, Cadillac has a rich racing history. GM's been, from the Corvette onwards, it's been fantastic. I don't know. I mean, the thing is, you're asking the person who would go back and look at the data of the driver and see what kind of how well they worked with the engineer, how well they worked in the simulator, and whoever had the most experience and was best at that, that's who I'd hire. So I might look at someone like Magnussen, who I don't think is in the frame for it. You'd have to talk about Perez. You'd have to talk about Bottas. And those are the most experienced drivers who've had the longest careers and potentially could bring the most to the table as your senior driver, sort of driving the direction of the car from the driver point of view, because obviously your engineers are going to be doing their job too.
I don't see Magnussen coming back, so I'd eliminate Magnussen from our inquiries. I don't know if any of you ever played Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo or arcade, and you got Ken just walking away at the end and like leaving everything behind. That was Magnussen. He was doing that with an armful of babies, like a litter of babies. We're not seeing Kevin Magnussen back, I don't think.
Okay, I've thought of one more. Here's my tinfoil. It's never going to happen, but I can come up with a plausible scenario. If indeed Max leaves Red Bull and winds up at Aston with Newey, and they don't get rid of Stroll, that means Alonso needs someplace to go. In that case, even though he's not my favorite driver, I would say Cadillac should snatch him up and get them to lead the project because he is no doubt an amazing driver.
What do you think, Jules?
I thought the list of driver names that was published in the media, it was so uninspired. Sergio Perez, Bottas, Guan Yu Zhu. What these are not guys we really need to see back on the grid. No offense, of course, but Bottas, Perez, they are 36 years old next season. So I thought, and I'm maybe gonna say an even bolder option than Matt suggested, but George Russell, he still is out of a contract for 26. I mean, this guy knows he's not the future of the team because obviously they put all their money on Kimi Antonelli. So why not try and persuade that guy to, make the team his and for him to develop that team? Obviously, of course, he's not going to be in a race winning seat from the get go. But try something like this and something that makes you want to look forward to this team, which is not with the names that we see. Or why not give Alex Palau from the IndyCars a shot, who he was on the rooftop shouting after winning Indy 500 2 weeks ago, like, yeah, just put me in a Formula One car and I'll beat anyone, something like that. Well, let's try that,
I think, though, what we're listing is a list of really good second seat people. So, like, for Perez makes sense from a fan base point of view. He's not going to be anywhere near as bad as he was at Red Bull. Like, there's enough proof of that now. We've seen. Like, who else do you want to try? How many more sacrifices do we need to see in that second Red Bull seat before we let Perez off a little bit? And actually, Perez's performance, in retrospect, I don't think they look that bad. Lawson did a good job. Oh, God, he must have loved Lawson coming in and being like that and being a big C. But yeah, look, Perez makes a lot of sense. He's going to have a huge fan base from that side of the water. He's probably going to come with money, so that makes sense. Bottas makes sense as a number two because you got to think, like, he's got so much experience. He''s a great reference point. Zhou Guanyu as well from there's no America link, but I'm assuming he will come with money and he will not crash. Am I damning with faint praise? Brings funding and not that crashy. And then I assume Mick Schumacher would come with money as well. So, but you're right. What we don't have is that superstar driver, Matt, for you.
Yeah, and that's because the ones that we all have are still in their active careers in Formula One. So you're just looking at the most experienced, best record, worked with the best teams to just help establish the culture of the team, to work on the simulator, and to help the engineers understand how to work with the drivers to put something on track that's going to be competitive at a Formula One level.
So has Danny Rick retired, or is he just without a seat? Because wouldn't he be like an option as Perez or Bottas?
No. I think his reputation got far too rinsed. So, look, okay, I think he'll always be remembered. The pivotal thing of his career is leaving Red Bull, and then Red Bull go on to win 4 drivers' championships after that. I think that's something that's very hard to recover from, and I wonder if you look back at that with that career and you go, my real chance was staying and going toe to toe with Verstappen, and who knows, you can get yourself a Rosberg 2016. So people still say that compared to that Verstappen, that Daniel Ricciardo could go and win races. They suddenly get a race-winning car, and maybe he can nick a year. Yeah, maybe he can nick a result. Hamilton ends up winning 2021. Because they're there taking points off each other. But yeah, maybe he can nick a win and a world championship. But from there, it looked fairly unimpressive. The Renault era was nothingy. Then McLaren, an absolute disaster for his reputation. You then got a chance to go and rehabilitate yourself against Yuki Tsunoda, and he didn't take it. So you can't risk that. How many concussions can you take before they take you to the medical center?
Yeah, and like even now I'm sitting here thinking, going like, who could we get that has like that? And I'm thinking, oh, Jean-Eric Verne, but he's been in Formula E forever. Yes, he's a genius driver. Or maybe you could get one of the McLaren rejects that had a great reputation going in, but didn't really get a super. But you need ultimately for that second seat, for that, well, let's call it the senior seat. Well, I got the fast seat. That's going to be your Palau or, Colton Herta, whoever they drag up that's still young enough to have reflexes. But then you need someone who knows how stuff works and can assist the team in getting up to speed. And sadly, I don't think that's going to be the most exciting choice unless you're a fan of said driver. Like I think Perez, like you said, brings a lot of money and a super excited fan base.
Yep.
So from that point of view, if I'm GM, I'm like, yeah, this has got to be our leading contender, even if we might get a slightly better driver or even someone who's slightly better at the job, just because it's going to make a lot of other things easier for us right off the bat.
Okay, so what if you go into it saying Perez is going to be our superstar driver, and then you have a Bottas alongside him, and let's say they're fairly even, but it doesn't really matter which one of the two ends up being slightly better than the other, because you're not going to be at the top end. You're going to be trying to nick the odd point. You're going to try and keep it out of the wall. Nobody is actually really going to blame Perez and Bottas if they go in and Cadillac are the 7th or 8th best team and they're kind of even. Everyone's going to be pretty satisfied with that. And then you can work on it. You can wait for a Leclerc to suddenly be available or a Russell to be available. So I think Perez Bottas would be fine. You've got two experienced drivers who are not going to stick it in the wall. There's a bit of money there. They can extract something out the car. Was Bottas as good as Hamilton? No, but he was good enough to win some races against Hamilton. That's not nothing. So I think there you go. Perez, Bottas. That's my pick.
Team 107%.
Team what? Oh,
that's a joke on the qualifying. 107%.
Yeah, is that still a rule that you have to be within 107% of the fastest?
I believe it
car?
is, actually.
Is it? Okay. That's very niche. It's good when you have to explain it in detail afterwards.
I've always been told. I get told that a lot,
That's the best one. We touched on Aston Martin. Briefly. And we have got, sorry, I don't know, I haven't got the name, Ezekli, who says, I reckon we may never see Lance Stroll in an F1 car again. Milo says, I reckon Max is going to Aston to work with Newey and Alonso. Lance is done. Valtteri Bottas to Red Bull. Oh, yeah, he offered himself, didn't he? Sam said, I reckon there's very little point in keeping Alonso around from a performance standpoint. I can't see him getting smacked around by Max and not being upset. But I'll start with that last one. The Alonso performance this year, or the deterioration, or the fact that he's behind Lance Stroll, has been quite alarming to a lot of people. And a lot of Lance Stroll fans have seen that as an opportunity to go, aha, see, Stroll's... I had one in my replies going, this shows you, Stroll's, coming together. Now, if that was happening a bit further up the grid, I would genuinely agree. But we've said it for a long time. If they ever become equal, but it's at the bottom end of the grid, then that's a sign that Alonso isn't doing well and is fading. And he keeps now talking about, I'll have a future role with Aston Martin. The guy's 44 years old. It would be no surprise at all if he had just taken a step back and isn't now able to extract some stuff out of a Formula One car. People are saying this about Lewis Hamilton at 40. Mattia Binotto came out and said Ferrari should have had him 3 years ago. That would have been the better time to have him. And that's 40. Alonso is 44, and it's not linear. The more 40-somethings you get along, Jules knows, that drop-off is exponential. So, yeah, I think that's the interesting thing, Jules, first, is the Alonso problem. And I think that if he did partner Max, he'd be sitting there, just bigging up Max and saying, oh, he's amazing. He's the only one that could be beating me like this.
Knowing Alonso, on one hand, yes, but on the other hand, he would probably complain about how unfortunate he is and that he's got the worst job in the world and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, what's the point really? And I don't mean to upset any Alonso fans or whatever, but there's not really a point in keeping him on or him hanging on to this. Because obviously the team is going backwards, and I feel Adrian Newey, if he really is going to repeat his trick at this team single-handedly, which I doubt, it's going to take some years. And, Stroll out, Alonso out, and make that team into something you can sympathize with, and maybe actually drivers who can make that team move forward is my how do you say this, judgment.
Yeah, Matt, I guess I think now if they go into 2026 with this current driver lineup, it's a waste of Newey anyway, isn't it, at the moment as it stands?
Well, we got to see the car they bring in 26 with Newey at the helm and what it does for the drivers. And I'm torn now. Do I introduce my first real MotoGP reference here and talk about Stroll? Because once again, Dr. Javier Mir, the MotoGP specialist, has done the operation. And we know now that it was his wrist that had the operation done on it. But there's an expectation now being set that it's possible he'll be back for Canada, Stroll will. We've seen that in print. It's not confirmed, but that's sort of there's now reason to think that he might be back for Canada. But the more interesting thing is the car itself. And, when we all made fun of the F1 movie for, we'll beat them in the corners, right? Well, apparently Aston took that literally, and they've made a car that is very good in the corners, but has more drag than my kitchen refrigerator does down the straights. And this, according to Alonso at least, and to other people who are writing about the team, is one of the reasons we've seen such an inconsistent performance from him, because he's having to overload the tires in the corners to make progress, and they just fall away in the race. He can't sustain it, but you can have an occasional good qualifying that way. So there may yet be some car magic that can be done to let them be a bit more competitive, because they are they at the bottom? They're close to the bottom, if not the bottom of the grid. And that's not someplace we're used to seeing them even when they struggle.
If you have any pushback on me assuming that this is the end of Alonso as a force, do get in touch. Always get in touch with us. We love hearing from you. Feedback at missedapex.net. I'm not just saying this because because of money, but we do see the patrons' comments way before anyone else's. So do consider joining our patron Discord by going to patreon.com/missedapex and consider being a patron, even if for a little while. But yeah, get in touch and just say, do you think I'm being harsh writing off Alonso? The reason I don't think it's the same as, say, Sainz's struggles or Hamilton's struggles this year is that there isn't really an excuse of there's been a major change in the car. We've just seen a general drop-off of performance. And we haven't seen him, just sticking it in the barrier. He has had one crash, hasn't he, this year? But it's just a overall, like a general drop in percentage. I would need to see evidence that it's Lance Stroll has taken a step forward, and also then the car is really, really bad, and Lance Stroll has taken a step forward, all of which is conspiring to make Alonso look bad near the bottom of the grid. The far more simple answer is that his performance has dropped. So do let me know. Always feedback at missedapex.net. Let me know if you think that I'm being too harsh on Alonso. I don't think this takes away anything from his early 2000s performance or his great determination in racing, even in those like 2015 era Honda McLarens. I have been a fan of Fernando Alonso for a long time, but I don't think there's many mid-40s guys at the top of elite sport. So Lance Stroll, then you're hearing rumours he's going to be back for the Canadian Grand Prix. Matt, if you had to guess a number, how confident are you?
I go about 65, 70%. Okay. He's the surgeon who did the work gets people back on their bikes very, very quickly. And he was the same one who did the surgery that got Lance back on the grid when he had his big bike crash. So I think it's reasonable. I suspect it's going to be down to the being able to get out of the car quickly enough and being able to correctly manipulate the rotaries and the buttons with his with whichever hand had the operation. Because as I remember, he sort of messed up both his wrists pretty badly.
There's a danger here though for Aston Martin if they don't get him back in the car and they put a Djokovic in or a Bottas, because Bottas is available. Isn't Bottas technically the reserve driver for all the Mercedes customer teams? So yeah,
they've made him available to all the Mercedes teams.
Okay, there you go. So you could have a Bottas. And if you say Bottas is still fairly near his operating percentage, so he's not a 44-year-old, for example, you could really expose something at Aston Martin. What if he goes in there and his performance is like a pretty standard F1 performance and it highlights how far the Aston Martin drivers are off, that could be a disaster. So I'd imagine, because this team is so Stroll focused, that Stroll missing a session is really the worst case scenario for them. Did he miss any races at the beginning of the season where he broke his hand, Matt? Or did they rush him back in?
I think he missed testing, but I believe he made the first race of the season. Although this is why we have a hive mind in the chat to help us out.
Exactly. So I don't think we need to really dig too deep into who's going to replace him, because I think they will make every effort to get him back into the car. Jules?
Can I put my tinfoil hat on for a really tiny bit?
Yeah.
I mean, we know Lance Stroll, right? And we know how he behaves himself in front of the media. Could it be that it might be convenient to him to miss his home Grand Prix, because it obviously comes along with a lot of media stuff and attention and having to do all these kinds of things? And he'll be like, you know what? I'm going to be injured for this one.
So interesting. First of all, it has been confirmed by the chat. Thank you, chat, that he did start the season, did Lance Stroll, after his bike crash. But Bottas comes with a very special gift for any team that chooses to employ him.
What is it?
And that is an unserved 5 grid spot penalty from his last official race in Formula One, where he smashed into Kevin Magnussen and got that penalty, and then was unable to serve it in the first race because, of course, he wasn't racing anymore.
Oh, and the rules do say to be served in your next race. So the race after the event where you get the penalty. Oh, no. Yeah, so maybe that might even be enough. That might be enough. So any Mercedes team, though, who uses him as a reserve would have to take that penalty on. That makes him not a very good reserve driver, a prospect then, at the moment. All right, let's go to Hamilton and Ferrari. Actually, with Ferrari, I think I want to start with Vasseur. So Abdul says, I reckon Ferrari finishes in the Constructors in second place, with neither driver in the top 4 standings. Marcelo says, I reckon that there will be a reckoning at Ferrari if the suspension upgrade fails. And Steven says, I reckon if performances stay as they are right now, Lewis retires at the end of the season. Start with Hamilton. In the race review, I said, if it is this bad, it's over. If this is representative of the gap between him and Leclerc, it's over. But Matt, I believe we have a laundry list of potential Hamfosi excuses. So if you could reel them off and make me feel better, that would be great.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to the accompaniment of whatever emergency vehicle is trying to get down my block right now.
They're coming for you.
Not for me this time. It's not this time for sure. The simplest thing is, I would say there's no way.
Sorry, Matt, that is so Brooklyn.
You want to wait for the chaos to pass?
No. It's just, I think we just make it part of the show.
It's like an extra character, you know.
Well, I love the beep that was in there, like, get out my way, ambulance.
Yeah, well, that's actually, I'll tell you what it is. It's because there's a light and there's no room to pass. It's people honking to get people to drive through the red light and let the emergency vehicle through.
Okay.
So now I've explained that.
It's a feature of the show now. It's fine.
For Hamilton, no, there's no way I retire at the end of this year when I have a brand new regulation set coming in next season. There's no way. As bad as this year's car feels, as unable as they are to give him the balance that he wants, as difficult as it is to get what he wants out of his engineer all the time, and as hard as it is to get accustomed to it. And even if I'm Hamilton, I'm looking at the gap to Leclerc and I'm thinking, I didn't think it would be this hard. There's no way I walk away from a brand new regulation set. You're going to have different sized tires. The aero is going to be more like what he's used to dealing with. And it's going to be a clean slate for both drivers. Plus, they'll have had a year to take his input on board. And that's going to be part of what goes into the DNA of this 26 car. So right off the bat, I would say, I don't think he's done at the end of the season unless he suffers some kind of an injury or has convinced himself that his reflexes are gone in a way that it's not safe for him to race anymore.
Why is he
I just don't see it.
He's so down. You could take that really pragmatic view and go, hey, look, it's a car I've had nothing to do with in terms of feedback. So obviously they've been listening to Leclerc for the last however many years, 5 years. Obviously, this car is going to suit him, but I've got feedback and I've got input into the 2026 car. They're going to listen to me. I'm Lewis Hamilton, and it's going to be a brand new car. Neither of us have driven it in this regulation set. It's 0-0 again, but it feels to me like he can't mentally get through this season with the kind of attitude of, it was always going to be tough, wasn't it? This was always going to be Leclerc's car where the upgrades aren't really working, but it's fine. I'll do my best. I'll do my best throughout this season, and we'll see where it lands next year. Hamilton has 71 points to Leclerc's 94. Hamilton has a sprint race win, and that points total for both of them includes being disqualified, both of them from China. This is being labelled as an absolute disaster, but the points are there. He's just looking a little bit slower than Leclerc at the moment.
And especially in qualifying. But you could make the argument that of everyone on the grid, Leclerc may be the quickest person over a single lap, even quicker than Max. He's just not as consistent and hasn't had the same car as Max. So again, if I'm 40 and I'm up against someone like Leclerc and I'm within 2 or 3 tenths, I'm thinking, yeah, that's fine because I can make it up in the race. And we've seen him have on occasion these sorts of performances. But the thing with Hamilton, and it's been true across his career, is he bends, but he doesn't really break. He'll be down. He wears his immediate emotions on his sleeves. He goes away for a few days. He comes back, and it's a job, and he knows how to do it. And he's going to get on it, and he knows how good he was. And I don't think he's yet convinced he'll never be that good again.
If you're Bottas, you can kind of go, whoa, that wasn't going very well. To be honest, Hamilton's a little bit quicker and he's a bit more consistent. And that's what he would say. He'd go, like, corner to corner, you'd be following him and he's just that little bit, you make a small mistake and then he steps because he's not making a mistake. And you can be Bottas and have that career and say those things. You can be Webber and say, I'm retiring because you don't get any faster. I think you can't be Lewis Hamilton and say, well, I'm not the best driver at Ferrari at the moment.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem for Lewis, and this is very true, is that short of saying bad things about Max, saying anything about Lewis is what gets people to look at your articles, to look at your YouTubes, to look at your Instagrams, to look at your TikToks. So anytime he comes out and says, woof, I've never had a car that bad, you're guaranteed a month of the narrative being driven by, how he felt immediately after a race, where he had the worst tire strategy and where they never got the car in the window where he was happy with it. And I mean, come on, if we were all held to comments like that after terrible performances, then I can't even imagine, honestly, how he deals with it.
Yeah, there is an element, though, of I don't want people who are driving F1 cars and that's their life. I don't want them to be too sad. It's like, unless you've had a donut that has had worms in it, generally your worst donut was still a pretty good donut. So when you go describe your worst donut, you go, yeah, it's pretty good. Donuts are great. Surely your worst year driving Formula One cars, it's still hey, I'm still going around driving Formula One cars, and it just makes you worry. It makes you worry if he's that down, is there fire to come back?
But that's not the way Hamilton's life appears to have been building up. I doubt, knowing his backstory as we all got to know it, I guess, hasn't been a story of, I'm so lucky to be here. It's been a story of being, how do you say this? It's down to yourself.
Yeah.
And if you want to move up one step, you need to work for it yourself, and it doesn't come handed to you in any way. Or he wasn't born in a golden what's the word?
We say
silver spoon.
We say silver spoon.
Yeah. So, and I think everybody is used to him being very self-critical, where other drivers point towards the car. And that's not working, that's not right. And are full of self-belief. He, especially in the last couple of years, he's been doubting himself openly, as he was on Sunday. And
Well, he didn't say anything about the floor damage, I don't think. So we got that from Vasseur. There was some floor damage. And then there was a little, and I am scrabbling around for a little bit of hope, that they were worried about Leclerc's floor wear, but they weren't with Hamilton. So perhaps they were running Leclerc a little bit lower and Hamilton a little bit safer. And then they had that issue where in practice he was talking about the rear being loose. And then that became an issue during the race as well. So, like I said, I'll stick to my original thing after the race review of saying, if that's genuine, it's bad, but I think there's maybe enough mitigating circumstances to not put him quite that far back. Okay, we're threatening an hour here, so I don't want to run over an hour, but what news stories are these here? So we could definitely cover some of this midweek when we do our Canadian Grand Prix preview. I'm looking forward to that, and I think, Matt, why don't we end by talking about the teams that might be looking at focusing on 2026. So Williams and Mercedes. They're the two teams, I think, on this triple header map where they've perhaps underwhelmed compared to the start of the season.
Yeah, Mercedes in particular has had, I think you would describe it as a torrid run across the triple header with Antonelli and Russell. Like each race, they had some kind of a mechanical problem. Twice Antonelli out, I believe Russell in qualifying with a wiring loom issue. And it really, they scored very few points. They didn't look particularly competitive. And I think for the first two races, James Allison came out and said, essentially, what happened was we got the setup wrong. So the car was never going to be fast. It was going to be a struggle to begin with, and we got it wrong on top of that. And he says, but the good news is we're like pre-disastered for the whole rest of the season. Like we've had all the bad things happen in these three races. But the other thing to consider is that much like Ferrari, they did bring an update to their rear suspension, and they weren't able to get it working the way they wanted it to. So they actually have taken it back off and they've gone back to the lab to try and improve it some. So there may be something left in it for them. But what they're going to be doing from here on out, I would imagine a lot of the teams is that the updates that we see throughout the rest of the season will have already essentially been designed as part of the whole season. And they're not spending resources solving big problems at this point. They're just bringing stuff they had already planned to, and they're going to make the optimizations as they need.
I don't like this thing of teams switching focus to the other year. I wish there was a system by which you had to keep trying in a year. And it really does remind me of that family game of Monopoly, because you start off with 5 or 6 people and then I don't want to play anymore. Oh, it's rubbish. It's like, yeah, but you've still got houses and properties. Yeah, but you've got Mayfair and Park Lane or whatever the equivalent is in your local Monopoly. And it just feels like half the teams now, they're spending the rest of the season not developing anymore, dropping down relatively with each other down the order. And then each week you've got to give an interview going, well, how come it didn't go well today? The season started well. How come it's not going well now? And they can't just give the answer of, we threw the towel in. Sorry, we gave up after Barcelona. They won't say that. So they go, well, we're developing, we're doing this and that and the other. And the whole team is really focused.
Yeah, I don't think you can call it giving up, though.
I can call it what I want.
I think if you look at Williams in Barcelona and probably again in Canada, you're looking at tracks that really don't suit the concept of their car very well. They like short, sharp corners, and they don't like long, loaded corners. And you're getting a lot of them in these races, especially once they ditch the chicane in Barcelona. So, but you'll see them again at Spa be competitive and other races like that. But it is like there's a simple solution. Get rid of the cost cap, give the teams unlimited money and unlimited resource. And then they would compete for every single point, every single race, every single lap, while at the same time being able to develop a brand new car for a brand new regulation set. But if you're going to impose any sort of real world constraints on them, then what you're really complaining about is knowing that this is how the sausage is made, because this is kind of how it has always worked.
I just don't like it. That's all I'm saying. We have some requests, though, Matt. We have a request in the live chat to talk about Horner And I'm not all over the story, except that there are some people saying that his situation may be under threat. So while Matt gathers some show notes, I will say, if you are new enough to Missed Apex that you don't know, Jules Sager's here. He is a Dutchman, and he does a different podcast as well, which is the MotoGP pod, Missed Apex MotoGP pod with Kyle Power. Congratulations. Big milestone that we mentioned when Kyle was on. 1,000 downloads for an episode is crazy. Do you realize what like percentage of podcasts that puts you guys in? Like basically no one gets 1,000 downloads for a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, we started this 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And we're trying to be consistent, we're trying to be knowledgeable, we're trying to be fans,
And just having fun
and
as well.
yeah, and have fun talking about it. And it's just amazing that so many people apparently think we're doing a good enough job that we deserve that time. So it's a massive thanks to all of those guys and girls.
And well, Matt's on it as well, and Carl's on it. But they've got the same philosophy as the main show, which is where we'll be on in the background while you're doing stuff, and we'll try not to be too intrusive and try not to be too wrong. But just give us a quick. Is this a good time to jump into the MotoGP season, Jules?
Yeah, I think so. The start has been unexpectedly dominant from one rider, and his teammate has been struggling a lot. And there has been a surprise rider. It's usually tight racing.
Jules, translate it to F1 for me. Like, what's the scenario that is is it like Antonelli coming in and surprising everyone by going on a title run?
We don't have an Antonelli this season. We have like an Alonso or Hamilton.
Oh.
Suddenly, after years of having not the greatest material, finding himself in the best machine and like swiping the floor with everybody, except for his own brother who rides for a different team.
Nice. Sounds like drama. Go and check out Missed Apex MotoGP in the show notes below. Go on, Matt. Go on. Matt's dying to say MotoGP things.
I'm dying to say MotoGP things because we have the reigning world champion out with an injury like Schumacher with his broken leg. And we have our own Hamilton and Pecco Bagnaia, who's been completely lost when the dominant Alonso came to his team and it wiped the floor with him. And just in this race, I'll give you a little teaser if you want to jump in, just in this race, suddenly he found something. So yeah, the season isn't half over yet, and it's super dramatic.
And you know what, Spanners?
Go on.
The reigning world champion that Matt referred to, who had injured himself, he joined a new team for this season. He's ridden one race for them due to his injuries. And now he said, I want to leave you guys. I don't like the bike. See you later.
Oh, mate, that does sound dramatic, but those vehicles do not have enough wheels, so I am out. They should fall down. They lean over so far. They don't fall down. That's not right. We're in a simulation. Matt, what's going on with Christian Horner? Ferrari approached him, I guess. His power, his grip on power has been loosening at Red Bull.
Well, yeah, this is really, we're coming to the culmination of the story that started with the death of Mateschitz, who ran the Red Bull team. He was the minority shareholder in the Red Bull enterprise, and they just let him do his thing with it. But with him gone, it has become more of a corporate enterprise. There has been corporate warring over who's in charge of what, and it turns out that Horner has allied with the Thai faction that has the majority of the shareholding, I should say. And Marco feels himself to still be, I guess, working for the ghost of Mateschitz, I suppose. I don't know. So all of this drama in the team has been percolating, aside from the personal stuff, the legal stuff, we're leaving that out. But for the first time, what we're hearing is rumors about Horner and the company not being happy with the results. And this is a new thing. It's still a rumor. I haven't seen an official release from Red Bull proper saying, we're blah, 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 blah. we are fully in support of Christian Horner, which would, of course, be the immediate death knell of him as a team principal, as we all know. But it's the first time that Red Bull has had bad enough results that this is a plausible rumor. And so therefore, even if it's not reality when it started, it becomes a reality that he is going to have to reckon with. If Max does not finish first or maybe second at best in the championship, then then he may be under some kind of real threat in terms of his job. And then the question becomes, because he has been so successful, is there a team that would say, yeah, in fact, why don't you come right on over and run our team instead?
But he has been so successful, and he's had periods where, even when they had the struggling Renault, Red Bull were operationally still one of the best teams out there, and they were still disrupting the strategy. Everyone still had to think about what Red Bull were doing. They're pitting now. Oh man, if they're pitting now, maybe that's the right thing. But really, they've just got it in their heads, and Red Bull were trying to disrupt the field and get undercuts going. So it's really hard to argue with his track record and his ability to come back and have a new successful era. And you go, what, was that not down to Christian Horner? Then I'm not overly praising him. I'm not a fan. But from a results point of view, going, okay, there's a blip. You haven't won a championship in, checks notes, 8 months. It's been 8 months since he last delivered a championship. It seems to me that it must be more than performance. It must be they're looking at it politically and they go, they're not going to get the result here. I can call for results, and then that will be the reason why I get rid of him. It almost sounds like a result looking for a reason rather than the other way around.
Like a clever HR kind of a ploy.
Oh,
well,
yeah,
we can't fire them for the real reason, but they didn't show up for work on time 3 days this week, so we can fire them for that.
Yeah. So, okay. The last thing I will say on Red Bull is there is an element of the internet, and I know we should just ignore the internet, that have started going after the strategist at Red Bull. And I'm bad with names. Hannah Schmidt?
Hannah Schmitz.
Hannah Schmitz, right. Okay. So there was this post that was going around saying it's time to have an uncomfortable conversation with a picture of Hannah Schmitz. And, it was about the call to go on to hards. Like one call from the team who is famously the best strategy call team on the F1 grid, who has been strategically perfect to the point where at Silverstone, when Norris went onto the wrong tyre, when I saw Hamilton go onto a tyre and then subsequently saw Verstappen go onto the same tyre, I was then relieved. Oh, phew, Hamilton is on the correct tyre. This corner of the internet that is looking to get momentum going against Hannah is a misogynistic, bigoted group that are seeking to attack the only female strategist. That's why they're doing it. And if you see it, let's just call them out on it.
Well, I love the fact that I'll use the big word, incongruity. First of all, Max was on a 3-stop strategy that worked to perfection and actually had him within touching distance of potentially winning the race. That's your strategist. Your strategist doesn't pick the tire out. Your strategist goes to the performance engineer and says, what's the best tire for the restart? And that's how that choice gets made. You say, we have a brand new hard tire, or we have a soft tire that's already as old as the one that he's on. And they chose the new tire. Now, in hindsight, you could say there might have been a chance on the soft tire. Everybody else on old tires lost places, but maybe he would have lost fewer places. But frankly, some of the places he lost was down to the fact that he freaked out being on that tire. And that's part of it too. So, are there things that could be better about it? Yeah. Does that have a lot to do with Hannah or the job she's done for how many years now? How long has she been strategist there? Probably close to a decade. No, you people are, they're probably words that as an old person I would use that I shouldn't use now, but you people are that and then some, and you just need to sit down and be very, very quiet without opening your mouths.
If you wanted to look for an excuse to attack a high-profile woman because you're a bigot, then you've picked the worst possible woman you could have gone for, and that just easily highlights why you're doing it.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and I think we shouldn't underestimate the the stature that Christian Horner has to a certain part of Formula One fan base. He's like right up there with Max Verstappen and all the successes. And Christian Horner has been just as much almost the face of those successful years. So it's easier with a lot of other hotshots gone from Red Bull in the past year to then just point your finger towards the female on the pit wall. I think we shouldn't underestimate. Maybe Horner's under pressure, but he has a lot of backing among the Formula One fans.
And you have a lot of backing, Jules, because we've seen your downloads for MotoGP. Go and follow Jules. Who is your handle on social media still at Jules Sagers F1?
No, it never was.
Oh, okay. In that case, I kept promoting the wrong handle. But all the links to Jules' social media will be in the show notes because of Matt Trumpets that puts them there. Go and follow Matt at MattPT55 everywhere. Unless that's changed or I've been getting that wrong. If you want to come to Silverstone and hang out, then email me spanners@missedapex.net or feedback@missedapex.net with the word Silverstone in the subject line. And we've got loads of topics here that we didn't cover. We never got to the Norris stuff. I've got a lot of your reckons. We didn't talk about the FIA presidency, but that is something I will tackle in our midweek show and our Canadian Grand Prix race review. Until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast. EJ says it was _Jules _on F1. That's a niche map reference.
Yeah, Chris Stevens' original one was the best.
Chris _/_ on racing. See you later, guys.